What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the 1796 Titans podcast. Where after a pretty good hiatus, we are back, and boy, did we walk back into a dumpster fire. Um, Titans are now 1-5 on the season, and pretty well out of the picture. We're now seeing trades being made. It looks like the ownership and front office has conceded this season already, and this is not where I thought we would be, Jack.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not from whenever we're looking at the season and we were looking at the roster. On paper we were looking pretty strong. Of course, with L'Jarius Sneed and Calvin Ridley, all these other guys, of course. And the season has gone on a complete 180 compared to what we thought it would be.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking when you step back and look at it because, like you said, all signs pointed to you know a decent team. I mean, I don't think anybody was expecting to be one of the best teams in the league or anything, but I think a lot of people were expecting 7 to 9 wins, pretty comfortably, just with the way the roster broke down. But you obviously had the quarterback issues, the offensive line issues, and now you have injuries on the secondary and a whole manner of other things. And it seems like the coach is not who we thought he was either, at least through 6 games.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's probably this might go down as one of the worst seasons in Tennessee Titans history, comparable to 2014, 2015.
Yeah, and that's really saying something because those 2 years were pretty bad. But
and yeah, they didn't have half the talent that this team has, which
yeah,
makes it even worse.
yeah, that's the biggest deal to me. Like before those seasons, nobody expected anything, but we discussed it before the year. I mean, we thought we had the most talented wide receiver room the Titans have ever had. We thought we had the most talented corners the Titans have ever had. Um, and I still think on paper those things are true, but games aren't played on paper. It just there seems to be so many issues. I mean, Nick Vanette mentioned this week after one of the practices that the vibe on the sideline in the second half was not good, and that just tells me there's not anybody stepping up to lead. And the ones who might be the leaders, well, the one I have in mind, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, he can't really do much when the quarterback position is the way it's been.
Yeah, for sure. And I think he knew that he was going to be traded too. He didn't play as much as he probably should have played in that Bills game, as you saw him off to the side with Coach Callahan. Um, and so I think that trade to the Chiefs was kind of in the works for a few days
Yeah,
before that game, as they kind of usually are. And so, bless DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, he talked about how Rand did him right and sent him to a contender, and treated him the way that he should have been treated. Because honestly, the same thing I feel like with Derrick Henry. I'm just so glad they don't have to deal with this team. I'm so glad, because it's not fair, man. Like it's really sad. Like, as much as you blood, sweat, and tears for this team, and it just crumbles around you for whatever stupid reason, and it's embarrassing. And that's why, I know some of the fan base doesn't like this, but I'm rooting for Derrick Henry. I am, and I'm going to root for DeAndre Hopkins, not necessarily to win a Super Bowl, because I can't. I don't need the Chiefs to three-peat and deal with that for 3 years in a row. That's just too much. But yeah, I mean, I want them to do better, because you know uh, this franchise is I don't even know. Like, it's embarrassing. It's so embarrassing to be associated with this franchise.
I mean that's where we're at. I mean, and it really hurts me as a season ticket holder. I'm spending money on this, like, and me and my brother have decided it's going to be a for laughs deal from here on out, the rest of this season at least.
Well,
Like,
I hope you're not going to renew.
Well, we're banking on them being good in 3 years. That's just the reason we made this investment. So we're gonna ride it out probably. But our our discussion was we're gonna go to the games and laugh and be there for the memes, which this team has produced plenty of those. I mean, we've gotten like 4 or 5 from Will Levis. Like, but you're completely right. It's nice that at least these players who've given their all for the Titans are going places where they can be successful. It's tough for me to say I'll be cheering for Derrick Henry just because it's the Ravens, but I hope he does well individually. I would rather them not win another Super Bowl. I mean, the Ravens have won 2 Super Bowls in my lifetime, but it's just I don't even know where to start on the issues. I mean, I mentioned it right off the bat. I don't think Callahan. He just seems to be in way over his head, which is it's kind of expected as a first time head coach, but I did not expect it to be this bad.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, none of us expected it to be this bad because we thought Brian Callahan was at least, quarterback whisperer esque in that, he coached, not necessarily he was like the main guy, but he coached, Matthew Stafford, Peyton Manning, um, you know, Joe Burrow, and I think there's another one in there too. But, all elite quarterbacks. So we believed that he can operate and call and coach, an offense. And I don't necessarily fault Rand per se, but, they had good meetings and, we were in on this too. I think we all thought that Brian Callahan was the top candidate.
For sure.
And I don't know if there was another candidate necessarily that would be better. I mean, you look at Antonio Pierce, another one who's going through the same thing with the Raiders. Gerard Mayo, who's not doing too hot either. Of course, he has a rookie quarterback, but still, I mean, he even called his players on defense soft. Even Bill Belichick took offense to that. So that's kind of funny on ESPN there. So, I mean, given what Rand, had at the moment, Ryan Callahan was the right choice. Now, hindsight is that we chose wrong, again, sort of like, we chose wrong with Will Levis, or we chose wrong with Mariota or Zach Mettenberger, etc. It just goes on and on and on and on, and I don't necessarily think that Mike Vrabel was, should have stayed on. I think he kind of reached his peak. But this team has taken such a large step back from last year, whenever at least they were competitive and they cared. This team is I don't even know what this is. This is bad, and it's just it's not going to get any better. We just lost our best wide receiver.
Yeah.
No. And and then we just traded Ernest Jones. It's kind of a even trade, I think, on that part.
Yeah.
And then, we lost Jamal Adams the week before. I mean, the implosion, it was coming. I mean, we should have saw that kind of with the, Jamal Adams, and I kind of wrote about it earlier before the Bills game that, the Titans are imploding. And, the trade deadline and all that stuff, and maybe there's still something to come down the pipeline. Maybe. I wouldn't doubt it, as Rand's looking towards the future, because obviously that's what the Titans are doing if they're going to get rid of their best wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, shout out Calvin Ridley. Thanks for having 32-year-old DeAndre Hopkins, be the best wide receiver on this team. It's just I don't know. It's hard to really even say, It's just so disappointing, and it's just embarrassing. I know I said that before, but it's so bad.
Well, that's the frustrating thing. It seems like Rand did everything right as far as roster construction. I mean, if you wanted to nitpick, we probably shouldn't have gone to the season with the right tackle position being the way it would, and we probably shouldn't have gone into the season without another pass rusher, a consistent pass rusher. But besides those two things, I think the roster was good enough to, like we said, compete for a wild card spot at the very least. But
Yeah.
it's just falling flat, and there's plenty of reasons why. I wanted to touch on what you said about the Vrabel thing. Like, I know a lot of people are saying now, it was a mistake to fire Vrabel because of what Callahan has done so far, and I think that's one of the biggest, falsehoods in all of coaching hired him. Like, just because the guy you hired to replace him is worse doesn't mean it was the wrong decision to fire the previous guy. I think two things can be true at once. Like you said, I think Vrabel had reached his full potential here, and he wasn't going to do much better. But to his credit, the roster was far worse last year, and we did not look this bad. But again, it's just because you made the wrong hire doesn't mean you made the wrong decision to fire the previous coach. It is my main point. And I think a lot of Titans fans are falling into that trap right now and making the, already bad feelings worse. Like, you can't be looking back. I mean, that's, like you said, hindsight.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough, and for me, honestly, and I think and I feel that Brian Callahan probably should not be the head coach going into the future for 2025. I mean, it's a hard sell. You have to sell this fan base that Brian Callahan is not the problem and that it was the players on the roster. How can you sell that when this is the best roster, that the Titans have had, over quite some time? So I'm not really sure how you sell that to a fan base.
I'm 100% with you. I think we've seen enough already from Brian Callahan. I don't think through 6 games when, like, Calvin, I'm going to use Ridley as an example. He was supposed to be the number 1 receiver, and like you said, Hopkins, for better or worse, it has been, and he's been hampered for half the time with the injury issues, but he still has produced better. And now when you watch Ridley play just on highlights, it looks like he's giving half effort, but I don't really blame him because where's the proof of concept with this offense? Like, I 100% don't blame the roster when we spent the most in free agency. We made a wholesale changes in a lot of positions. Like, I totally agree that it's going to be a hard sell to not blame it on the coach. And I want to mention this now because it was befuddling at the time, and it still just blows my mind. I know analytics are a big part of football now across all levels, but you have to, assess the game situation now, which numbers don't take into account. Our defense was stopping Buffalo. And then in the first drive of the third quarter, we decided to go for it on a 4th and 2 around midfield, and we get stuffed. And then the game goes completely upside down from there for the Titans. It was appalling.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll tell you, like I said, I was at the game, unfortunately, and Buffalo Bills fans wanted us to go for that 4th and 2 because they knew that would change the entire momentum of the game and that we wouldn't pick it up. And of course, we didn't. And that just changed the entire. We were never the same team after that happened. The defense completely shut down Josh Allen the entire first half. I think he had something like 56 pass yards or something like that. And, James Cook, he didn't have much on the ground either. And then all of a sudden, second half starts, they start with a short field and, Amari Cooper, I think it was Amari Cooper, catches that touchdown, who came off the streets, 5 days earlier. I mean, not off the streets, but you get the point, right? Didn't know the playbook. He didn't even know where to line up. Keon Coleman is telling him, okay, you're going to run, a 10-yard in. And that's what he did. And then he scored. Like, how is that possible that the guy doesn't even know what he's running as the play is about to get snapped? The receiver next to him tells him, this is what you're running. And then he does it and he goes and scores a touchdown. And it's like, you can't even make this stuff up if you wanted to. Really, you can't make this stuff up. It's like we have Bleedy Ray Wilson and Cody Sensabaugh still back there. Like it's so mind-boggling. It's just incredible. And then they were unstoppable the rest of the way, right? They scored 24 points unanswered or something like that.
27, yeah.
27 points unanswered. And it was just like so bad. It's just bad football all around. We can't block anybody. We can't get the run game going. And they talked about this. I can't remember who was talking about it post game, but they were like, "Yeah, we didn't adjust. We didn't anticipate the adjustments they would make on defense." Well, that tells me everything I need to know about Brian Callahan, because that's what happens after every single game. We're the worst second half team in the NFL by far. We're the worst second half team in the NFL. We can't score. And if we do score, it gets front loaded in the first half, with 10 points or 17 points or 13 points or 14 points. And then trying to score again is like, going uphill in, a snowstorm. It is absolutely impossible for this team to play all 4 quarters. And it's insane that this is like what's happening with all the new, players and all that stuff. And yes, you may say Mason Rudolph, he's still a backup quarterback. Okay, cool. But he still played pretty well for Pittsburgh at the end of the year last year and still played a playoff game. I can't remember if he won that playoff game or not, but he still, did well enough that he's a competent backup. And, all of a sudden we can't run an offense, or all of a sudden Calvin Ridley can't catch a ball. Why are we paying some guy $25 million to not catch a ball? When someone's 32 years old can catch a ball. When NWI can catch a touchdown. Tell me how this makes any sense. NWI is the best wide receiver on this team right now. As of this very moment, that is Nick Westbrook-Akine. That is frightening. And that is absolutely abysmal. And you cannot run a football organization with NWI being your best wide receiver on the football team, making 1/25th of what your second best wide receiver or third best wide receiver is making.
I mean, that has to contribute to what Nick Vannett said. Like, this team just checks out with any type of adversity. And when, your highest paid players are contributing nothing, like it can only hurt it. Like, it's just nonsense. Like, I want to hear your thoughts on this, because I'm about out on Jeffrey Simmons. He seems like too much trouble for what he gives on a losing team. Like, how much difference is Simmons making on this team right now? Like, and for him to run his mouth to Josh Allen while we're getting bludgeoned, for him to fight with a Nashville radio guy before the season even starts. Like, he's probably the leader of the defense, for better or worse, the last few years. And he acts like a child consistently and gets these backbreaking penalties. And it's unfortunate that we can't trade him because of the contract we gave him before last year. That's where I'm at right now with Simmons.
Yeah, I understand. I understand that, because Simmons has done some of the dumbest crap, like last year. I think there was like an offsides or something like that on a field goal, and they were able to reattempt the field goal, and they made it. Right? I think that was a Cincinnati game, or he did something illegal. Right? It was a Cincinnati game where we were supposed to win that game. And then this one, he lined up off sides. I think it was like third and like a lot or something like that, this Buffalo Bill game, and then it shortened the drive or whatever, and they picked up the third down from the penalty. He does do a lot of dumb things. I'm not necessarily ready to give up on him. I do expect him to continue to do dumb, stupid things, but he's still a really good player, and he was a pretty big reason why they weren't able to really establish a run game. Him and T'Vondre Sweat are probably the best interior D linemen in the NFL combined. Because I was watching them, and they were really doing a great job up front. Now, getting pressure on the quarterback, different story. And that's been, one of the Titans' biggest issues since forever. Arden Key got the lone sack, last week against Josh Allen. Harold Landry didn't. Jeffrey Simmons didn't. T'Vondre Sweat didn't. I'm not expecting necessarily T'Vondre Sweat to pick up sacks. But I still feel Jeffrey Simmons is still a really good defensive lineman, but he does have some bad games at times. And I think maybe his elbow may be still playing a part in that. And he has had, a few injuries throughout his career. But if somebody were to offer me a 1, would I would certainly entertain it. Just because if I can go 1-5 with him, I can go 1-5 without him and have an extra first round pick.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah. I understand.
I'm not disputing that he's a good player. Besides all the extra stuff that I talked about, I just when your best player is a defensive tackle on a 1-5 team, like it just the best player is supposed to be like a quarterback, running back, a wide receiver. Like it's winning teams. Your best player is not a defensive tackle unless you're the Rams and you have Aaron Donald 3 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just it's like the Colts with Quentin Nelson for years. I don't know if he would be their best player still now, but it's a position that doesn't necessarily decide if you win or not. And I don't know. That's just where I'm at right now with a lot of things on this team is I don't know. Like I think that sums it up. I think there's a lot more pieces that we could trade. I guess Diggs is a really good one to shop because he's on that 1-year deal. Tyler Boyd's another one. It's a cheap deal. I think people would entertain that. At SJD, we could probably get something for that too, a veteran tackle. But other than that, there's really not much more that you could do trade wise to get draft capital.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like I said, I think maybe, Rand might still be entertaining, somebody or somebody's, a few people. I'm not sure. And I don't even think we'd be able to get a 3rd round pick back for L'Jarius Sneed if we tried. His injury issues, his overall play has been, straight garbage. When you talk about being the best player, he was supposed to be the best player on this defense. Mm-hmm. And I think, having a lockdown cornerback is necessary in this pass-happy league that is the NFL now, in 2024, where somebody that can lock up Justin Jefferson or lock up Amari Cooper or whatever the case may be, and it just has not come to fruition. Instead, he's getting beat by like Ashlyn Dulin of the Colts. Like who is this guy? Like I don't know who this L'Jarius Sneed is, and it's bad. This whole concoction of a team is just an abomination. It's like it's almost like a Frankenstein monster where you just put a piece here and put a piece here. And granted, it looks great, but whenever you put it all together, it just doesn't really, it's just doesn't really come together in the team aspect that you would hope that it would. But I think that's where, Coach Callahan has to take the brunt of the blame. What is going on? It's assumed, it's known that Denard Wilson knows what the heck he's talking about. He seems like he was on track to get a head coaching job. I'm not sure if that's the case anymore, or I'm not sure if maybe he might end up being the head coach at the end of the year and getting him as an interim, head coach if Brian Callahan continues on this path. So there's no way Brian Callahan is going to continue on to be the coach of this team if we're 1-8, 1-9. I cannot fathom that. Especially with I would assume that Amy Adams Strunk was was expecting a much better output from this team given everything that Rand Carthon gave to Brian Callahan. And so that's my big concern. Yeah.
When you give the Ridleys, the Sneeds, the type of contracts you gave them, and then they perform like this, it just goes back to that cliche of they got paid, so now they're comfortable, and that's the danger of building a team through free agency. And it just goes back to the teams who spend the most in free agency are normally not going to be even making the playoffs most of the time, because you hand out these deals and then they chill out a little bit. They don't work as hard as they did before to get to that point where they were worth that type of money. And I said it earlier, like when you spend that much, it has to fall on the coach. And that's another thing. You mentioned Denard Wilson too. Like statistic wise, this team should be better with how the defense looks just on the stats. I know they've been pretty bad situationally. Like the perfect example was the play at the end of the Colts game where Snead is checking Pittman, and then Pittman just makes some ungodly catch, game-winning touchdown catch. And I know people will say, well, Snead was hurt. You know who else was on the injury report the next week and didn't play? Michael Pittman.
Yeah.
That's not an excuse. Like, it's literally the worst case scenario that could have happened this year. Because I know the number one thing this year was find out if Levis is good or not. I think we found that out, but he hasn't played he's played the one game he did play, and that's another thing. There's no reason he should have played the Colts game if that's all that he could do. Because that whole game plan was like dinking and dunking and checking down until we were losing. Then he throws deep and he can't hit anybody because he can't lift his arm above his head. That was another nonsense coaching decision. And another thing about that Colts game, we started Leroy Watson at right tackle. We didn't give up a sack for the first time in years. And then we get to Buffalo and we're starting Jalen Duncan.
Yep.
What are we doing? That makes zero sense to me. It just further proves to me that this coaching staff is scrambling and they're in over their head.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, and then MPF went back in the game.
Yeah.
And he still posted one of the worst PFF grades. I mean, I don't. You start, running out of things to say really about how bad this team is, overall. Like, and I think really it just starts and ends with Coach Callahan. I can't fathom if Bill Belichick was given this team last year. Would they be in the same position? Would they be 1-5?
I doubt it.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
I think if you give this team to half the coaches in the league, like I think they've at least won three games.
Yeah,
minimum.
I mean, there's a lot, even with Mason Rudolph starting. I think we could have still won 3 games, whatever the case may be. I mean, I believe we're both already out on Levis. I think 90% of the fan base is too. 90% of the fan base is already looking at the draft because that's the only hope that this team has for the next, 8 or 9 months. I mean, it's just so bad. This was supposed to, and I talked about, and you talked about that this is, worst case scenario, because now we've signed Calvin Ridley, we signed L'Jarius Sneed, we signed Chidobe Awuzie, we signed Tony Pollard, we signed Lloyd Cushenberry, we signed Diggs, we signed, or at least we traded for Sneed too. But we acquired Ernest Jones because we were under the assumption, Brian Callahan, Rand Carthon, we're under the assumption that this is the best team that we've had in quite some time, and we had the ability to compete. And yet it's been anything but. We are not competitive whatsoever. And we are one of the worst teams in the NFL. I mean, statistically, on record, everything, we are one of the worst teams in the NFL. And that just cannot be the case. When you have and now you're supposed to rebuild with a rookie quarterback, because there's no way am I giving Levis another year. Not happening. This fan base, if you thought they were checked out now, wait till next year if you give Will Levis and Brian Callahan another shot. It's absolutely there'll be riots. I think I think before the game starts, they'll take down the goalposts and throw them in the Cumberland.
Like you can't. I really don't see a scenario where somebody in the front office doesn't say we probably shouldn't do this. Like I hope that's the case, but nothing would surprise me with the way this organization has been going the last really 3 years now. It's what the funniest scenario would be is we sign Mariota to be the bridge quarterback.
I mean, he's looked better than any quarterback we've had behind center this entire year.
Yeah, I know. I wouldn't be opposed to it if we don't want to go with a quarterback in this draft class. But
I think it would just be hard to sell, and to wait another. I mean, if you look at the Raiders, right? They didn't take a quarterback. They rolled with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. Now look, they just wasted 2 years because last year they had Aiden O'Connell, and I can't remember who the backup was, and whatever other random quarterback that was. It's hard to sell a 2-year, no future quarterback kind of situation, if that makes sense what I'm saying.
Yeah.
To go 2 years without any hope at quarterback would be disastrous. And so even if we don't love a quarterback, I think you have to do something that's not necessarily Marcus Mariota. I think you could give hope to this franchise with, maybe even a Quinn Ewers, who will probably go second round. I think you could at least do that. Or, Cam Ward. I think a lot of hype is going around him. And plus, we'll get to the playoffs, and I think that'll probably increase as well, as Miami will probably head to the playoffs, and Texas will end up in the playoffs as well, and so on and so forth, to see what these guys are like under pressure whenever, for the biggest college football, postseason that there's ever been. So I think that'll be really interesting. But we have to get Levis off this team. We have to find someone to replace him.
Yeah. I don't think that's negotiable at all. You got anything else on the big picture? Because the last thing that I have is I do think some of the best players on the team right now are Rand Carthon draft picks. So the more capital we get, the better I think the situation can be. But that's about all I have for the big picture. And before you want to talk about what in the name of God will happen against the Lions on Sunday.
Yeah, no, that's I'm done ranting on that part for now.
Yeah, I don't think this segment will last long, and then we'll hang this one up, Jack. I mean, what do you expect on Sunday from this team?
I saw a stat recently. I think it was something like the last 8 meetings between the Detroit Lions and the Tennessee Titans have won the last 8 meetings. So I thought that was pretty funny. But that'll be the last. That'll be it. The game that we played, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago against the Lions will be, we're not going to win this game. Not a chance. We can't even score more than 10 points on a good day. And we're supposed to keep up with Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jared Goff is playing outstanding football. No, it's going to be another blowout similar to the Bills. And they have a better offense than the Bills.
Yeah.
And, Mason Rudolph's going to trot out there with no DeAndre Hopkins and no right tackle. And it's going to be bad because Calvin Ridley can't catch. So it's just not going to be good. We're not going to be able to stop them on defense, maybe a few times. But in the second half, nope, they'll make their adjustments. We won't make any adjustments. We have no idea how to make adjustments. And so it's going to be bad. It's going to be a really, really bad game. Is it in Detroit or is it in Nashville?
It's in Detroit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, terrible.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, this is the biggest spread in any NFL game this year so far. And I think for good reason. I think last time I saw it was 11.5. I think it opened at 12.
Wow. Okay. And the Bills was 9.5.
Yeah, it was close. But I do not see a world where the Titans cover. I know in the NFL, I mean, people say that any given Sunday, whatever, but I just don't see a way. I mean, what's the only way the Titans win is if some catastrophic injury happens to Jared Goff, and I don't want that to happen. Like,
who do you want to say who the backup quarterback is of the Lions?
Hendo Cinco. I mean imagine that if Goff goes down and Hendon comes in and lights us up. I think that there would be kerosene and matches on the way to Nissan Stadium.
I mean, Josh Dobbs did it last year, just about.
Yeah, I mean,
so yeah, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary. I don't think this team could even stop Hendon Hooker, and I mean, I'm not saying he's necessarily a bad quarterback, but I don't think that he's starting NFL caliber whatsoever. But I have no faith that this team would be able to stop Hendon Hooker to Amon-Ra St. Brown and or any other wide receiver, running back, you name it. TJ Hawkinson. We'll see if he's going to play. I think he's still injured. Maybe we'll see. I mean, who knows? Michael Pittman was supposed to go on IR, 4 days before the game started, and then all of a sudden he's destroying L'Jarius Sneed. So
it's to be expected at this point through 6 games. But yeah, I guess we will hope for the best, but really, I mean, what's the point in winning? Like that's the reason my only scenario the Titans win is Goff getting injured. I don't want Goff, a quarterback that I enjoy watching. The ball rarely hits the ground in the last few weeks for him. Like his completion percentage is off the charts. I don't want him getting hurt to get the Titans a meaningless win. I mean, obviously it's a pretty glaringly obvious statement. Don't want anybody to ever get hurt, but I mean, I know some fans would say that, but what would it even mean? We get a worse draft pick? Like who cares at this point? So my score prediction is something like Lions 31, Titans 13 at best. I think the Lions could even get close to 40 like they did against the Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, if they wanted to, they could probably break that 72-point record if they really wanted to. Whatever it was that was it the Raiders or the Dolphins, I think, last year?
Yeah, the Dolphins scored 72. I think the NFL record is still 73. And then when the Bears won a Super Bowl and beat the hell out of somebody in the 40s. But, I mean, like you said, if they wanted to, they probably could because we know the offense will not be doing much just based on what we've seen. But
L'Jarius Sneed's not turning into 2023 L'Jarius Sneed. He's not going to be out there probably. Chidobe Awuzie is still on IR. Jarvis Brownlee, I mean, he's still a rookie. And then you have, Gabe Jeudy-Lally I don't even think he played last week. Maybe. It was hard to tell being, in the stadium. I mean, who do we have? I mean, what are we supposed to do here? It's unfortunate, the situation that we're currently in.
I mean, my best advice to the Titans is lose because this season's over with. So
I mean, Rand Carthorne's, that's basically what he's saying. If you're trading off your best wide receiver, and you're letting Jamal Adams go, and who knows who might be next. The season's over. It was over. When we lost to the Colts, I said that it was over when we lost to the Colts, and then it's definitely over when we lost to the Bills, and then we're going to lose to the Detroit. We might win against the Patriots. If we don't win against the Patriots, we're not winning another game.
yeah, the closest other win is the Jags at home, but I don't see a world where we slow down Trevor Lawrence against the secondary. We'll probably trot out there. So
yeah, so it's the season's over. It's week 7, and the season's over. I mean, that's a pretty bad indictment, as a whole for your team. And Brian Callahan, he deserves to take the brunt of that blame. This is not the Titans brand of football that we were expecting. I wasn't expecting a Super Bowl run, but I was expecting a competitive team that might make it to the playoffs. I remember our over/under was 6.5. Oh my gosh! I thought that was an easy, gamble there. Silly me. I would, my over/under right now would probably be at 2.5.
Yeah, I think that's about where I'd put it. Like,
and so
there's just not another win besides the Patriots, and that's iffy too. I mean, I wouldn't trust this team to beat like if you told me we'd be playing a high school all-star team from Tennessee, I don't think the Titans would cover what the Lions are going to have to cover. Like, I think it'd be a close game. Like that, it's sunken this far in 6 games. And like you said earlier, I can't imagine how Amy is feeling because to her credit, like whenever she's had to hire coaches, she's normally made a decent decision. This is the first time it's really blown up in her face like it has. So let's just hope she hires another one in the offseason because like me and you both said, we're out on Callahan. I think we've seen enough, much like we've seen enough with Levis. So I hope she can go back to her decent coach hiring days.
Yeah.
Maybe it was us not hiring a coach named Mike. Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah. We'll have to see if anybody pops up this, roundabout whenever coaching hires and all that comes up. We'll have to see. I mean, I don't even know. I'm not even sure who. I mean, maybe Ben Johnson.
Yeah.
I mean, his offense has been great for the last 2 or 3 years. They're in Detroit, so that would be something I would definitely, look at. We'll see, but I really, really, really hope Amy Adams-Strunk or Rand Carthon, however this goes, make the decision that Brian Callahan is not the person to lead this team. That's unfortunate because he seemed like a really good guy. I mean, he brought his dad in, who's supposed to be, who is, he is one of the best O-line coaches in the game. He brought in one of the best defensive coordinators available, and somehow or another, with the best roster the Titans have had since who knows when, we can't score more than 13 points. We can't stop teams from scoring, at will. It's pretty mind-boggling. It really is.
Yeah. You got anything else tonight, man?
No. I mean, just on to the draft. I really am. So sad to say. I'm just watching all these quarterbacks, Sanders, Ward, kid from USC. I think it's Matt. I think his name is Matt something. But we'll see.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and say we'll record another podcast when the Titans win a game. So I guess we'll see everybody at the draft. So That sounds about right to me.
Yeah.
So I guess all there is to say is a very low morale. Tighten up.
Tighten up.